all hear me?
Yes.
Thanks for coming, everyone. I hope people walking past will come and join us as well. We're here as part of the Bridgwater People's Assembly, which is also part of the Somerset People's Assembly, which is part of a network, a growing network of groups organising against austerity, against the government's cuts, which in fact are ruining our society. We know that there are thousands of people living in utter poverty and desperation because of what this government says that we have to pay for the economic mess which was created in this country by the bankers, by the rich, by the ridiculous economic system. And the government says we have to pay for something which is not of our doing. We hear stories every day. Just today, Shelter, very highly respected charity for the homeless, says that there are going to be 800,000 children homeless in this country at Christmas time. Homeless because of this government's wicked policies. They won't be the children of the rich, they'll be the children of people who have been made unemployed, who have lost their homes, disabled, victims, no fault of their own, cannot keep up with the cost of living. That is unacceptable. 973,000 young people between the ages of 16 to 24 unemployed in this country. No hope of getting jobs. What a way to start your working life, in desperation and in poverty. Meanwhile, what did we hear the other day? 340 MPs, to their absolute disgrace and shame, have claimed this year £200,000 of taxpayers' money in order to heat their second home. What a disgraceful country we live in. What a scandalous government. And we're here to list those policies that this government is forcing on this country, and we're going to bin them. And I wish those Tory politicians were here as well, because we'd like to bin them as well. And we're not any longer accepting the lies that we're hearing, the scapegoating, the dividing of old against young. Old people live too long and are taking young people's jobs. Meanwhile, of course, they put up the retirement age. We're not listening to those lies about the unemployment problem being the fault of migrant workers working against British workers. Those are lies, and they're about dividing our society, and we want to be united in defending people against this government and against austerity. We are opposed to cuts. We are not striders or shirkers. We are all in it together, and we're all in it together against this rotten, stinking government. And we want to build a movement that puts mass pressure from below on politicians from whatever political party, especially those who want to make the next government, to say to them, if you want to govern this country, you govern it in the interest of the working, ordinary people of Britain. You give us what is ours. You don't privatise our services. You don't allow the rich to dodge taxes anymore. You give us that what is ours. You make our society worth living in. So what are we going to do now? We're going to start with some of the Tory policies that we hate the most. And I'm calling them Tory policies. I know we've got a condemned government, Liberal Democrats, but frankly, those Liberal Democrats, they do not deserve the name of Liberal anymore. They have gone in the party, they've gone into the nasty party, and they are part of the nasty government. So, who's going to be the third policy that we did? Say Chapple.
I think it was William Shakespeare who said, great oaks from little acorns grow, and this is one of a number of hundreds of similar demonstrations all over the country today to trash, attack, bin, criticise the government policies that are making the rich richer and the poor poorer. And so far as I'm concerned, as a postman of 35 years standing, I've just been privatised. And what that means for me, having walked about 15 miles today up and down the Folding Hills in Willhaventon, is that I don't deserve that, and neither do the 100,000 postal workers that I work with up and down the country deserve to be privatised, because we're a very labour intensive industry. And I'll just sort of tell you two effects of it. Firstly, because we're labour intensive, the people who've now bought the Royal Mail, the post office, founded in King Charles II's reign, have only one way to go to increase their profits, which is to attack my wages and conditions, and the little bit maybe of pension I built up over those 35 years, £90 a week actually, not kind of gold plated. So they'll start off by attacking that, won't they? And the other thing they'll start off by attacking is our union conditions, because in Bridgwater certainly we're very strong. In fact, we voted for a strike ballot today over yet another bit of bullying and harassment. So we don't deserve to be privatised, and neither does the Post Office of Royal Mail, because a couple of things that you might not know is that when you look at the railways and the development of the railways in the 19th century and how they built up this country, you think about what the Post Office did in Sir Rowland Hill, bringing the postage down right to a penny. Do you know what that meant, the penny postage? It meant that as industries were being built up, they could afford to send their wares and their samples all over the country in the mid-18th century after 1840, which actually meant almost as much as the railways, this country and the standard of living, insofar as it isn't being attacked and is slightly higher than certainly the third world, depends to quite a large extent on the post office. And where would we be in terms of the internet if the government of this country hadn't built up the telephone system? Because that wasn't private, that was public. It's private now. But the telephone system of this country was built up by the post office. So that's the history that's been dismantled. And let me tell you what it will mean. It will mean, for example, in New Zealand, they decided just to deliver to 3 days a week now. It could mean that if you live more than 50 yards away from a road, you'll have to come and collect your mail, no matter if it's pouring down with rain, from a gatepost. It will mean that if you post a letter to the Shetlands or Aberdeen in a few years' time, it might cost you 5 times as much. So those are just a few of the ways in which privatisation is bad for me, it's bad for the history of this country in terms of what should be publicly owned, what should be commonly owned, and it's certainly bad for everyone else here. And whether I deliver a bill or a present or a Christmas card, you want that to be delivered on time at a reasonable price, and exactly the same whether you live in the Shetlands or you live in Bridgwater and you want it delivered 6 days a week. And so for me, Royal Mail privatisation should be consigned to the flames, and if there's any justice in this world, there's any justice in this country, someday the Royal Mail will be renationalised. Thank you.